Hello and welcome to video 2 in your training series of 3 videos designed to just tell you about the 3 most important things that you really need to start thinking about as a small business owner. So on this video we are going to be talking about dealing with suppliers, which is very important, and you'll find out more and more about why it's so important as we go through the video. Now, as a small business owner, we often feel that we have to accept the terms of business that suppliers send to us. Or perhaps we question something only to be told by the supplier, these are our standard terms and we never change them. And at that point, we roll over and accept their terms. Or, as is often the case, perhaps we don't even give their standard terms more than a passing thought. In many cases, not even reading them. I know, we've all done it, haven't we? Well, I'm here to tell you that you don't have to accept your supplier's terms as a fait accompli, and you don't need to be afraid to negotiate where necessary. Now, it would be unusual for the supplier to walk away from the deal simply because you want to discuss and negotiate the terms on which you're prepared to do business. So when you are dealing with suppliers, do ask them for their terms of business. Do actually look at them. Do read them, do understand them, and do question, clarify, and, where necessary, negotiate their terms. Now, this is particularly important where you're tied into an agreement for any length of time. Be sure to check any initial periods where you can't serve notice to terminate, or a lengthy notice period, or inadequate termination rights so that you can't terminate for poor service, for example. And do look out for wording that means that if you miss serving notice on one exact day by the specified method, the contract rolls over for a further initial period. That can and does happen. So say you had an initial period of 2 years and you missed the day on which you had to serve notice, that could roll over again for a further 2 years and you'd be tied in for 4 years to possibly a substandard contract. Now, if you're dealing with BT or Virgin for your home broadband, then you're unlikely to be able to negotiate that contract. But seeing as you're probably going to be able to terminate that contract on 30 days notice, it's not the end of the world. But for suppliers who are trying to tie you in for a lengthy initial period, perhaps even with minimum purchase orders and a long notice period to terminate, then you need to be really sure that the contract works for you. Now, you might be happy to be tied in for a long period because you're getting a lower price, but do make sure that your termination rights are still adequate because, if you're stuck with a substandard services and no right to terminate, then that deal that you did on the lower price might not look quite so sweet. So the termination rights that you need to insist on are that you have the immediate right to terminate for material or persistent breach of the contract and on the insolvency of the supplier. Now, the supplier might say that they need to be able to remedy any breach, and usually that would be within a period of 7 or 14 days from your notification to them that they've breached the contract. But actually, this might result in an unsatisfactory state of affairs where, the supplier is persistently breaching the contract, for example, by failing to meet service levels, but then remedying them so that you don't have the right to terminate. But with the end result that you have to live with the detrimental effect that the failure to meet those service levels is having on your business. So there's very often a question mark over whether poor service is actually a breach of the contract. If the specification of the products or services isn't clear in the contract, then it's going to be much easier for the supplier to argue that they aren't actually breaching the contract, even if you allege poor service. So do try to be as detailed as possible about the products or services that your supplier is providing you with, so that it's absolutely clear that by them not meeting that specification or service level, that they're breaching the contract, entitling you to terminate. So that's it, a pretty whistle-stop tour through negotiating with suppliers, but they really are the 2 key issues. Try not to get tied into a lengthy period, and if there's an initial period, then do check how you can give notice and check that it doesn't automatically roll over for a further initial period if you don't serve notice on that specific day. Check that you're not tied into minimum purchase orders Because again, if service levels fall and you want to terminate, then you could have a fairly hefty penalty to pay if you actually want to get out of that contract. And this can and does happen to small businesses. I had a client who came to me who'd signed up to an email service provider contract, she'd met with a sales guy. He'd told her how fantastic this new product was and how she was going to see a huge increase in her open rates. So she signed up to a minimum term of 2 years. Now, she didn't read the small print, and this contract did actually have that provision that said that if she didn't terminate on the exact 2-year anniversary of the contract by sending written notice to the head office by registered mail, then the contract would roll over for a further 2 years. Now, she'd thought that because the service was rubbish, quite frankly, she used to have quite high open rates and they just went through the floor when she started with this new system. And for her type of business, that was critical. So she tried to terminate. She sent them an email in about the first 6 months saying it's not working out, I've had all these problems, your sales reps, your customer service guys aren't getting back to me. And she thought that she'd terminated. 2 years later, she had an invoice for the remaining term. And she came to me and said, this can't be right. I terminated by email, only 6 months in. So we looked at the contract and legally, the supplier was quite entitled to continue charging for actually 4 years because she'd missed that day on which she had to give notice in the specified manner. So these things can really trip us up. So please do heed my advice, my very friendly, approachable advice, which is, do ask for the contract. I am amazed actually at the number of people who don't. Ask for the contract, read it, understand it, ask questions where you don't understand it. Get in touch with someone like me if you really don't understand what the contract is trying to say and you want to know how to protect yourself. We can have a quick chat. I'm more than happy to do that without charge. But understand it, understand the issues and really understand what you're getting yourself in for and negotiate where you need to. So that's it. Don't be afraid of suppliers. They want your business. And it's a lot better to negotiate at the start of the relationship than find yourself tied into a poor agreement down the line. So stay tuned for video 3, which is going to be all about how you can protect your most important asset, your brand. Now, a lot of small business owners that I speak to, when you mention trademarking, they think, oh, that's for big businesses. That's going to be far too expensive and complicated for me to even think about. Well, I'm here to tell you that is not the case. So do stay tuned for the next training video, which will show you how you can very simply, easily and affordably protect your brand. Until then, have a great week.